2024 went by very quickly, so let's jump right into it and take a look at the top 10 products of the year. At a price of around $34, the first product to earn a spot in the top 10 list is the Bosch M42 Cobalt drill bit set. The Bosch bits competed against 12 other brands. The first test was a speed test to see which drill bit could drill through half-inch mild steel the fastest. I used cutting oil to help protect the drill bits. I attached a wheel to the lever arms on a drill press, and around 20 pounds of weight on the pulley works out to be very close to 175 pounds of downward force on the drill bits. According to the drill press's speed chart, I set the RPM to 600 for the 3/8 inch or 9.5mm drill bits. And the Bosch bit performed very well on mild steel, outperforming many more expensive bits in 11.41 seconds on the first hole. However, this is mild steel, and the Cobalt bits are designed to really shine on harder steels. Drilling through a piece of half-inch spring steel is a lot more difficult than mild steel. So I lowered the RPM to 340. I also added 5 pounds of weight for a total of 25 pounds on the rope. That's about 220 pounds of downward force on the drill bits. This is a really tough test, and it took the Ryobi Titanium 50 seconds to drill through the spring steel. Very low price bits like the LW brand might be very tempting, but the bit is just way too brittle and it's ruined after drilling just one hole. After drilling through the spring steel, the Bosch Cobalt was within 2 seconds of most of the more expensive bits, but this is about to become more interesting. Once again, the drill bits drilled through a fresh piece of spring steel to test their durability. Unfortunately, the Ryobi was just way too dull to drill through the spring steel a second time. However, the Bosch once again made very easy work of the spring steel, this time finishing the job at 21.43 seconds. Even after drilling through the spring steel a second time, the bit is still in very good condition. Other bits like the Harbor Freight Warrior Cobalt bits experienced quite a bit of damage. To measure durability, the bits once again drilled through half-inch mild steel. And the Bosch performed very well at only 14.6 seconds. In a final test, I measured the drill bit strength, and most of the bits broke at under 200 inch-pounds of torque. However, the very affordable Bosch finished in second place at 215 inch-pounds. The Bosch finished in 5th place overall, but when you consider price and performance, it definitely deserves a spot in this year's top 10 list. And the digital Jayco tire gauge also earned a spot in the top 10 list. To measure the accuracy of gauges, I purchased 2 gauges for each brand. I bought analog, digital, and the pencil-style gauges. I put together a tester to compare the gauges at low, medium, and high pressure. The tester has 2 calibrated and certified gauges that are incredibly precise. Comparing the gauges at 16 psi, some of the gauges are way off. However, both of the electronic Jayco gauges were within 0.2 psi of the tester at 15.8, which is pretty impressive. I then tested the gauges at 40 psi. Once again, some of the gauges were way off target by as much as 9 psi. On the other hand, the electronic Jayco gauges once again did an amazing job at 39.8 and 39.9 psi. Testing the gauges at 60 psi, once again, some of the gauges really missed the target by as much as 9 psi. However, both of the electronic Jayco gauges were incredibly accurate and achieved a perfect 60 psi reading for both gauges. Very impressive! Adding up the total psi errors for both gauges, the Jayco digital gauges finished in first place for the 60 psi test. I always keep a tire pressure gauge in my vehicles, and the inside of a vehicle can become very hot like I experienced in this review at around 125 degrees Fahrenheit. Unfortunately, the high heat did cause problems for several gauges and caused pressures to read unusually low or high. Other gauges fell apart after being inside the hot vehicle. However, the Jayco gauges didn't seem hurt by the heat, as one gauge scored perfect and the other gauge was within 0.1 psi. I then placed the gauges in a freezer set to minus 20 degrees Celsius, which works out to approximately minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit. The cold temperature caused some of the gauges to behave very strangely. It also caused one of the gauges to self-destruct. However, the electronic Jayco once again was very close to hitting the 40 psi target at 40 and 40.1 psi. If you add up all the errors for all 10 measurements, the electronic Jayco ran circles around the competition with a cumulative error rate of less than 1 psi. The electronic Jayco definitely earned a place in the top 10. And the Knipex end cutting pliers could possibly be the best hand tool that I've ever tested and definitely earned a place in the top 10 list. In the first test, the end cutting pliers competed to see which pliers could shave a staple closest to the board. Some of the pliers really struggled in this test and left the sharp edge sticking above the board by quite a bit. On the other hand, the German-made Knipex pliers might seem expensive at around $63, but they did a much better job leaving a very short protrusion. Grip strength does vary by quite a bit, but you probably have a grip strength well over 100 pounds. The end cutters competed to see which one requires the least amount of hand strength to cut through a galvanized 16-penny nail. Unfortunately, some of the pliers will require over 200 pounds of squeezing force to cut through a buttery soft 16-penny nail. This set of pliers is bent and now run from the nail. If you buy the Blue Point, which is sold by Snap-on, you'll need some really strong hands to cut through a nail at 250 pounds. Wow! And the German-made Knipex pliers seem to laugh at this challenge as it cut through the nail with only 76 pounds of squeezing force. Very impressive! And the Knipex ran circles around most of the competition with only one more expensive brand trailing by 13 pounds. From time to time, I need to shave off a screw that's sticking out of a board. And the screw was just way too much for some of the end-cutting pliers to handle. The cutters on other brands were just way too soft and experienced a lot of damage. And the Knipex once again made very easy work of the task at hand and cut through the very hard deck screw at only 94 pounds. Very impressive. So the Knipex beat the competition by over 50 pounds. A drill bit is made of very hard steel and it's a huge challenge to cut through with end cutting pliers. While some of the pliers just could not make the cut, the Knipex made the cut at 164 foot-pounds. Once again, the Knipex finished in first place. I've never tested a set of cutters or pliers that can cut through an Allen key, and the first 15 sets of pliers all experienced catastrophic damage as expected. But not the Knipex pliers. And the Knipex pliers are indeed the first pliers I've ever tested to make the cut. Very impressive. The Knipex held up really well with only a small amount of wear and tear. And the Knipex is by far the best set of pliers and ran circles around the competition, finishing in first place in all but one category of testing. And the $20 Granite Stone nonstick pan is the next product to earn a spot on the top 10 list. Some of the pans just didn't heat very evenly and caused the pans to overcook the pancake. On the other hand, the Granite Stone nonstick frying pan heated up much more evenly. As a result, it did a great job of cooking the pancake evenly. Now I'm getting hungry. Assessing evenness of cooking the pancake is highly subjective, but the Granite Stone tied two other brands for first place. After applying a light coating of vegetable oil on all the pans, I compared the pans for how well they performed frying an egg. Some of the pans just did not fry the eggs evenly and the eggs became stuck. Once again, the Granite Stone performed very well frying the egg evenly and the egg did not stick to the pan. If you're in a hurry when cooking, thermal efficiency is a big deal. I measured the temperature of the water after 5 minutes on the burner. And the Granite Stone performed well in this test at 151 degrees, but not quite as well as some of the other pans. However, pans with higher thermal efficiency typically struggle to distribute heat evenly. On the other hand, the Granite Stone did a great job of cooking evenly. Cooking a cheese mellow, which consists of a slice of cheese and a marshmallow, really put the pans to the test. And the cheese became stuck to several of the pans and made quite a mess. However, the Granite Stone is just way too slick and made a perfect cheese mellow. In the final test, I measured the scratch resistance of the pans using a Mohs hardness test kit. While many of the pans experienced damage with the soft number 3 or number 4 picks, it took a number 5 pick to cause major damage to the Granite Stone, which is pretty impressive. So the $20 Granite Stone tied for second place with the OXO brand for scratch resistance and outperformed almost all of the more expensive brands. I converted raw score into an A through F rating, and the Granite Stone earned an A in just about every category. Considering price and performance, what a great value and definitely deserves to be on the top 10 list. If you're buying a brand new set of kitchen knives, you'll probably expect that the knives are nice and sharp right out of the box. Using a piece of paper to test knives for sharpness is just not very precise. I used a Best Certified Sharpness Tester to compare the knives. A double-edged razor blade has a sharpness between 50 and 75. A utility blade is between 150 and 200. High-end cutlery edges are between 250 and 350. Edges that need maintenance are 400 and up. The tester uses these disposable test clips. The tester measures the downward force it takes to cut through the test media. Unfortunately, some of the new paring knives were pretty dull, like this knife, which had a sharpness score of 400. On the other hand, the Wazeeka paring knife was the sharpest in the lineup, and it's as sharp as a utility blade with a sharpness score of 140. Very impressive! Out of 10 brands of paring knives, the Wazeeka came out on top. Blade edge retention is a huge factor to consider. So let's go ahead and run the knives across this piece of Osage orange. This is a very hard piece of wood which has a Janka score of around 2,500. I'll add 10 pounds to the top of the knife, and let's run the knife across the Osage orange 100 times. After 100 passes across the very hard Osage orange block, the Wazeeka only dropped 10 sharpness points, which works out to a 7% loss in sharpness. Only 2 of the more expensive knives did a better job at blade edge retention, but they didn't start off nearly as sharp. So after 100 passes, the Wazeeka still came out as the sharpest knife in the lineup. I then spent half a day sharpening all the knives to very close to the same sharpness. All of the knives have a sharpness score that's a lot sharper than when the knives were new. Now that I've sharpened all of the knives within 5 sharpness points of each other, I'll run each knife across this cutting board 100 times with 10 pounds of weight on top of the knife. A knife made with poor quality steel won't hold an edge, and some of the knives really struggled, losing quite a bit of sharpness. On the other hand, the Wazeeka held an edge even better than most of the more expensive brands, only losing 20 sharpness points. I also tested the sharpness of the chef's knives, and the Wazeeka is once again very sharp with a sharpness score of 130. In fact, the Wazeeka knife is the sharpest in the lineup, beating the far more expensive brands. And a Sentoku knife is typically a little smaller and lighter than a chef's knife, and it's pretty useful for slicing, chopping, and mincing. Once again, some of the new knives needed to be sharpened right out of the box. On the other hand, the Wazeeka is once again very sharp with a sharpness score of 150. And the far more expensive Global Santoku knife finally outperformed the Wazeeka for initial sharpness with a sharpness score of 125. However, the far more affordable Wazeeka knife finished in second place at 150. In the final test, I dropped all the knives on the blade tip to compare durability, and some of the knives experienced a tremendous amount of damage. However, the Wazeeka is very well designed and only experienced a small amount of damage to the blade tip. Comparing both the subjective and the more objective areas of performance, the Wazeeka came out on top with the best average finish of 1.8, and the Wazeeka is a terrific knife set that definitely deserves a place on the top 10 list. If you own a knife, sooner or later, it's going to need sharpened, and the Work Sharp definitely deserves a spot on the top 10 list. Unfortunately, some knife sharpeners do more damage than good and weaken the blade edge. To test the sharpeners, I bought brand new chef's knives, which are made of high carbon Japanese steel. I once again use a BEST certified sharpness tester, and the sharpness score of 140 is just way too sharp to test the knife sharpeners. I added 2.5 pounds of weight on top of the blade just to make sure that there's a lot of damage. So I dulled the knives by running them across a metal pipe back and forth a total of 5 times. And the chef's knife started off at 140, and now it's very dull at 1,160. So all the knives are very dull and need to be sharpened. For each of the knife sharpeners, I followed the manufacturer's instructions for knife sharpening. Some of the knife sharpeners didn't perform well, and I made a second attempt to sharpen the knife. What's nice about the Work Sharp is that all the pieces just snap together, and it takes about 15 seconds to set up. It also includes 7 abrasive grits as well as a leather strop. The Work Sharp has an adjustable knob to set the sharpening angle. A different knob is used to open and close the jaws of the knife holder. Once the knife is mounted to the holder, it just snaps into place in the body of the sharpener. After only 8 minutes of effort, the Work Sharp transformed a badly damaged blade edge into a very nice looking one. But the question is the blade edge sharp? 100! Very impressive! The blade edge is now sharper than new. After sharpening all the knives, the only sharpener to outperform the Work Sharp was the $1,100 Wicked Edge Gen Pro 3. At almost $1,000 less, the Work Sharp held its own against the more expensive knife sharpeners. But there's one more test that's very important, and that's the blade edge durability test. To test this, I ran the knives across a very hard wooden block that's made of Osage orange. I added 15 pounds of weight on top of the knives and made 40 back and forth passes. And some of the knife sharpeners did not form a durable knife blade edge, and the hard wooden block dulled the knives badly. However, the Work Sharp started off very sharp at 100, and now it's extremely sharp at 125. Definitely a very well-designed knife sharpener that deserves to make the top 10 list. And the Drio Space Heater also earned a spot on the top 10 list. It has a heat funnel design, and they claim it can go 200% farther than other heaters. It has tip over and overheat protection. It has a 1 to 12 hour timer, eco mode, and fan mode. The Drio is a very quiet space heater at around 40 decibels on the low fan speed setting and around 41 on the high fan speed. After testing all the space heaters, the Drio was one of the quietest space heaters in the lineup on the low and the high fan speed settings. The Drio then competed against the other space heaters to see which one could broadcast heat the best from 36 inches away from 3 thermometers. After 5 minutes of effort, some of the space heaters barely warmed up to 3 thermometers. However, the Drio did by far the best and warmed up the center thermometer to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So the very affordable Drio finished in first place for projecting heat. Space heater safety is a big deal, and most of the space heaters perform well in the tip-over test. However, not all the space heaters avoided causing damage during the tip-over test. On the other hand, the Drio performed very well and received the best possible rating. Each year, thousands of space heater fires are caused by fabric and curtains coming into contact with space heaters. I placed a pillowcase over the space heater to see how long it took for the space heater to shut down. With the pillowcase over top of the heater, the Drio shut down in only 46 seconds, and the fabric temperature only made it to around 250 degrees Fahrenheit. So the Drio performed very well on this test. Unfortunately, some of the space heaters continue to run for over 4 minutes with the pillowcase covering the space heater. The propane heater actually melted the pillowcase and started a fire. Not good. I converted raw performance into an A through F rating, and the Drio performed very well in just about every category. Considering price and performance, the Drio definitely deserves a spot on the top 10 list. And the Gear Wrench tool set is the next product to make the top 10 list. I first tested the working arc swing for the ratchets that were included in the tool sets. Some of the ratchets just weren't very efficient and it took over 20 back and forth passes for one complete rotation. However, the gear wrench ratchet performed very well at only 18 back and forth passes. The gear wrench and the crescent tied for first place for the working arc swing test. A ratchet with a lot of back drag really makes removing or installing fasteners in tight spaces a challenge at times. If there's enough space, adding resistance to the socket using finger pressure allows a ratchet to make progress, but that's not always an option. Some of the ratchets really struggle in this test at over 400 grams of back drag. However, the gear wrench ratchet continued to perform well at 251 grams. Let's go ahead and test the performance of the combination wrenches next on this extremely soft coupling nut. This is very soft metal and should not cause too much harm to high quality wrenches. I'll be using a Proto Torque Wrench calibration tool which is extremely precise. Let's see how much torque it takes to round the coupling nut. And the Harbor Freight Pittsburgh gave up at only 411.9 inch-pounds on the first attempt. I'll rotate the coupling nut 180 degrees so I can test the Pittsburgh again on the undamaged part of the coupling nut. And the Pittsburgh gave up even sooner on the second attempt at 384 inch-pounds. And the jaw on the Pittsburgh has stretched to 0.511 inches. And the gear wrench performed well at 520.3 inch-pounds on the first attempt. And the gear wrench continued to perform well on the second attempt at 501.6 inch-pounds. So all the wrenches did experience some jaw stretch from rounding the coupling nut, but the gear wrench held up really well for an overall second place finish on the second attempt. I also tested the closed end of the wrenches. Some of the wrenches rounded the coupling nut at less than 1,100 inch-pounds. Unlike the other wrenches, the gear wrench has a 6-point closed end. And the gear wrench refused to round the super soft coupling nut, but the wrench did bend with a peak force of 1,525 inch-pounds. I then tested the failure load of the 3/8 inch ratchets. All of the ratchets performed reasonably well, but the gear wrench came out on top, finally breaking at 302 inch-pounds. So the gear wrench kit definitely has the best ratchet. And the gear wrench came out on top with the best average finish of 2.4. Not only did the gear wrench perform the best overall, the gear wrench kit also includes the most complete set of tools compared to all the other tool sets. So the gear wrench definitely deserves a spot on the top 10 list. The next product to make the top 10 list is a Chilgo neck fan at a price of around $27. I didn't even know that neck fans were such a thing until someone asked me to review them. I first compared the noise level of the brands. Some of the neck fans were very noisy at over 75 decibels, but the Chilgo performed well at around 68.8 on the high fan speed. In the next test, let's measure the airspeed using an airspeed meter which uses a pitot tube. Cousin Eddie likes his winter hat, but he'll be wearing a baseball cap. He really likes to have a cool mustache, so we'll measure the airspeed at the bottom of the ears and the mustache. After measuring the airspeed at the ears, mustache, and the back of the neck, some of the neck fans really struggled with air movement. And the name Chilgo seems to fit at 746 at the ear and 121 and 152 at the mustache. 664 at the other ear is pretty good, and 835 on the neck is by far the best yet. Very impressive! After measuring air movement at 5 different points, the Chilgo came out on top. Having the ability to adjust the angle of the airflow is a game changer. Not everyone is shaped like Cousin Eddie. So I used an airspeed meter to measure the highest airspeed for each neck fan. In the final test, I compared the total runtime on the highest fan speed. And the Chilgo lasted 2 hours and 47 minutes. I also measured the charging speed for each of the fans, and once again, the Chilgo performed very well. While the Taurus did barely outperform the Chilgo in this showdown, the Chilgo cost around $250 less and definitely seems like a much better value. The Chilgo neck fan definitely earned a spot in the top 10 list. The next product to earn a spot on the top 10 list is the Kenmore Upright Vacuum Cleaner. Some of the vacuum cleaners were really loud at over 90 decibels. However, the Kenmore doesn't hurt the ears at only 81.2 decibels. It finished in second place overall for low noise level. Airflow and suction are two very important performance characteristics when it comes to vacuum cleaners. The box is made of wood and all the joints have been sealed with silicone and tape to prevent air leaks. And the airspeed meter on the side of the box will keep track of the airflow. I'll first test the vacuums unsealed. And some of the vacuums really struggle with airflow at around 10 miles per hour and less than 20 CFM. And the reasonably priced Kenmore performed well at over 14 miles per hour and 27.68 CFM. Considering the price of the vacuum, the Kenmore performed very well with the 4th place finish in this category. And some of the vacuums really struggled with lift at under 60 inches of water column. However, the Kenmore performed very well in this test at around 82 inches of water column, which will definitely lift dirt out of the carpet. Let's measure out 100 grams of sand and then spread it across some carpet. I'll use a concrete trowel to press the sand down into the carpet. For the vacuum cleaners that have a height adjustment, I'll adjust the vacuums to the medium carpet height setting. And it's the Kenmore on the left competing against the Shark that's on my right. And the Shark just doesn't seem to be too hungry as it's leaving behind a lot of leftovers on the forward pass. The Shark also left behind quite a bit of sand on the reverse pass, and the Kenmore seems to have done the best job so far at picking up the sand. After weighing the collection bins both empty and full, the Kenmore almost performed as well as the far more expensive Dyson and Shark vacuums, collecting 92 out of 100 possible grams of sand. And these airsoft balls were just way too challenging to pick up for many of the vacuums. On the other hand, the Kenmore made very easy work of the plastic balls and was the first vacuum to score perfect on this test. Even the $500 Dyson became clogged with plastic balls. So the Kenmore received the best possible rating of 1 on this test, along with the much more expensive Shark Stratos. I then compared performance of the vacuums picking up rice from a concrete floor. And once again, the Kenmore performed very well. Some of the vacuums threw the rice, but the Kenmore received the best possible rating of 1 along with several other vacuums. While the Kenmore did not perform well lifting sand out of a deep crevice, it more than made up for that vacuuming close against a wall. And most of the vacuums really struggled on this test as several vacuums pushed rice up against the wall. Unfortunately, then they weren't able to pick up the rice. However, the Kenmore scored perfect on this test and devoured all the rice without a problem. And the Kenmore finished in first place in this category. I converted raw score into an A through F rating to help make sense of the strengths and weaknesses of each vacuum cleaner. While the Kenmore didn't perform quite as well in some categories as the vacuums in the $400 to $500 price range, it definitely performed a lot better than the vacuums in its own price range. Definitely a top 10 product. Each year I test hundreds and hundreds of items, and it's very expensive to put together these reviews, so a big thank you to everyone that supported the channel over the past year. It's greatly appreciated. Also, all the videos in this channel are viewer suggested, so if you have a video idea, I hope you'll take time to leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching. Please take care and look forward to next time.